Imagine something that belongs to you. But to enter it, you need someone else's permission. You stand before it and they turn the key. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. In that moment, you understand that the right of ownership and the right of control are not exactly the same thing. History has shown this difference time and again. Sometimes the person who held the lock and the person who held the key were not the same individual. Sometimes the name of the person holding the key was written in no document. But the decision that affected the outcome was always made by them. The question of whose hand held the key was never simply a technical question. It was a question that revealed where economic power was concentrated. And the answer to that question determined the most critical turning points in the history of finance. The invention of the lock protected property, but the invention of the key divided property. These are two different events. One occurred at the same moment, while the consequences of the other stretched across millennia. When the first pin lock appeared in ancient Egypt, key ownership was very simple. The homeowner kept the key with them. The warehouse owner attached the key to their belt. Control coincided with ownership. Both resided in the same person. But as trade expanded, this simplicity broke down. The merchant could not manage every place at the same time. Goods were stored in different cities in various warehouses. It was not possible to keep the key to every warehouse in hand. It was physically impossible. And so the key was given to someone else. This act seems simple, but it was precisely this simple step that brought forth a great power in the history of finance. Agency, representation, and the system of trust took shape here. The person who gave the key was saying, "I trust you. Access to my property is in your hands." And the person who received the key took on obligations along with it. The obligation to protect, the obligation to report, the obligation of loyalty. This relationship lies at the root of all principal-agent theory. In the temple economy of ancient Mesopotamia, key ownership created a very clear hierarchy. The head priest of the temple held the keys to the grain storehouses, the gold treasury, the seed reserves. These keys were not merely religious symbols. They were the physical expression of economic control. Whoever held the key determined who would receive a share, which debts would be cancelled, which deal would be realized. The key became the instrument that converted spiritual power into economic power. The secret of why the temple economy was so effective lay precisely here. Roman jurists understood this principle early on. Roman property law clearly separated physical control from legal ownership. You could own something, yet grant another person the authority to manage it. This distinction formed the foundation of modern commercial law. But in Rome, this separation was also a great source of tension. When a slave held the key, which was very common in large households, who had control? Legally, the owners. Practically, the key holders. This gap created wide opportunity for exploitation, for breach of contract, for political manipulation. Or, in medieval Europe, the feudal system exploited key control in a systematic way. The lord was the owner of his land, but the peasant was the person who unlocked the door every day. The peasant harvested the grain, filled the storehouse, kept the accounts, but the key belonged to the lord. This relationship was not simply economic exploitation. It showed how power was organized. Even if the lord was far away, the key was in his hands, which meant his control never stopped. The continuation of ownership, regardless of physical distance, was considered the greatest strength of the feudal system. The church refined this mechanism even further. The keys to religious archives, treasuries, and land documents were in the hands of monks, but the owner of the property was the church. This separation gave the church exceptional influence. The monk who held the key was technically an agent. But over time, the agent reached the same level of power as the true owner, because the day-to-day decisions were made by him. What would be kept? What would be sold? To whom credit would be extended. In theory subordinate, in practice independent. This tension, The difference between formal ownership and real control lay behind many of the greatest financial crises of the Middle Ages. The church trusted its agents. Some of those agents converted that trust into personal wealth. The interests of the key's owner and the key's user did not align. Venice was one of the first commercial cultures to approach this matter systematically. In partnerships known as commenda, who would retain the key, who could see which accounts, who could make which decisions. All of it was determined by written contracts. This move to writing was a true revolution, because the key was no longer simply a piece of metal. It had been converted into legal power. To enter a property you wanted, it was not enough simply to hold the key. Your name had to be in the contract. This transition from physical key to legal access is the beginning of modern corporate law. Today, the director of a company does not physically place the company's key in their pocket, but a contract grants them the right of access, determining which accounts they can view, which decisions they can make, which assets they can manage. The Industrial Revolution made key control even more complex. With the emergence of factories, banks, and railways, property grew so large that no individual could fully manage it. The joint stock company was the answer to this problem. In a joint stock company, the key was no longer a piece of metal in one person's pocket. The board of directors, the board of trustees, accountants, and auditors collectively shared the key, each holding a piece, none holding the complete key. This divided system of control is the foundation of modern corporate governance. But this division created new difficulties. The company's owners, thousands of shareholders, did not hold the key directly. The key was in the hands of managers, and a manager might not always act in alignment with the owner's interests. This problem, the risk that the key holder would act in their own interest rather than the owner's, remains one of the greatest problems in modern finance. Its name has changed. It is now called the agency problem, but its essence is the same. Wherever the key is, the power is. The digital age rewrote this relationship entirely. A password is a key. An authorization protocol is a key. API access is a key. The power of technological platforms comes largely from who keeps these digital keys under control. Today, large technology companies are so powerful that their blocking of a key can halt the economic activity of an entire country. This power does not come from weapons, land, or gold. It comes from the key, from the ability to determine who has the right of access to what. Throughout millennia, who held the key has changed, but the matter has not ended. From the priest's hand to the Lord's, from the Lord's hand to the bankers, from the banker's hand to the corporations, from the corporation's hand to the technological platforms. Power has been transferred each time together with the key. This transfer generated resistance every time, because the person who lost the key was not merely losing a piece of metal, they were losing control, power, and economic independence. That is why throughout history, the dispute over the key was never simply a physical dispute. Think of the password you use today when you log into your digital account. That password is your key, your access to the bank, your access to your property, your access to your economic life. What do you feel when you lose it? If the key determines power, who holds the most keys today, do you think? If these kinds of questions pull you back and compel you to think deeply, how power is transferred, who keeps control in their hands, how simple objects can create great economic effects. This channel is dedicated precisely to that. Subscribe, and every week we descend into the deep layers of the stories that shape the world you live in today. If there is a moment in financial history that has always interested you, share it in the comments. The next video can continue from the point where your question ends.